Just there, The Big No-No, that's from Gavin Friday. And Gavin, you're very welcome once again to the programme.
Thanks, Dave.
The Big No-No is the band, is it? Who is the band?
Well, there's 5 musicians. There's my partner and collaborator, Morris, the man Caesar. He's piano and keyboards. And then there's 2 Americans, Eric Sanko, plays bass on the LP as well. Danny Bloom plays guitars. And Renaud Point, he's a Frenchman. And he plays,
Really? I never would have guessed.
Yeah. He plays wind instruments, saxophones, clarinets, tin whistles, flutes, whatever. And Roy Martin, who's a drummer, a Liverpudlian. And
you played one Dublin gig, and what else have you done so far with that band?
Well, we did sort of a warm-up show in Cork and Sir Henry's and a Dublin show in the Ringside about 2 weeks ago. And we've done 2 London shows, and we're off for a 4-week tour starting this weekend in Europe.
Over to Europe, which is a bit of a hunting ground for Gavin Friday. I mean, if you think about it, like, even in the Prunes days, like, if bands think of going, they went to London, say, in the 70s. If the U2 thing is to be followed, they went to America or something. But you did it completely. You went to what's known as mainland Europe.
I don't know. It's just, they seem to sort of, Gavin Friday, you know, they have an appetite for him. Always had, whether in Virgin Prunes or even the record before this, each man had a far more receptive time in Europe. And in certain pockets, I'm a bit of a star, believe it or not.
Gavin Friday, star, shocker.
Yeah.
I see. Well, what about Europe then, and Gavin, with this new album? I mean, you just said that the last one, that Europe took to it quite kindly. Was that because of the fact that they knew you as the Prune person, and the Prunes did very well in Europe?
Yes and no. I mean, I did have, and I still do, you still do get the men in dresses and the goths coming to the odd gig, even in London. But it was like 3-4 years. By the time I went with the Each Man Kills tour, it was 3-4 years since I had played Europe with Virgin Prunes. Really, I think what I was doing was, was very European influenced, the first solo album, like the Brechtweil Cabaret number, and they seemed to be far more open to that type of music. Where in Britain, I think anything that isn't heavy rock or rave vibe, it's very hard to get in any door at the moment, or even 2-3 years ago, you know.
Mm.
I don't know, I think the English always had they could never take the Virgin Prunes really, because we were sort of like going on about surrealism and performance art, and we wore men in dresses, and the English never really liked the idea of paddies being aesthetic. So and the English and the Europeans sort of open arms they took to it, and I think it's a bit like that even now.
Well, the men in dresses, as you call them, who have gone to see the new Gavin Friday, if that's what I can call it, in other words, not Virgin Prune, in other words, Each Man Kills the thing he loves, Gavin Friday, would you be sort of almost against them now, or have you just personally yourself turned your back on that?
On Virgin Prunes?
On men in dresses, sort of saying,
the
whatever the Virgin Prunes used to be.
The dress is well hung, you know, it's in the wardrobe, it might slip out at any time. I sort of dabble in it a bit on Adam and Eve, when King of Trash and Kitsch and Camp, and I mean, I've grown up a bit, you know. The dress became a uniform almost, Dave, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, the Virgin Prunes sort of imploded, went up their own ass in many ways. I've no regrets about that. I mean, we went up our arse in glory. And the dress is like, it's like anything. It just becomes a uniform, and you have to get rid of it.
And you move on.
You move on, yeah.
Well, you had 3 albums with the Virgin Prunes, so when you moved on, you didn't move into music. That was, say, 85. Did you feel it a terrible loss in 85? No matter how much you felt it had imploded and gone up, as you say, your own ass. The point is that, like, did you sort of say, whoops, what am I going to do now? Or did you know exactly what you were going to do? Because you didn't dabble in music for a couple of years.
No. Well, I was very sort of disillusioned about the so-called what am I to do with music. Well, it's like, you know, I formed the band when I was 17, and it was like an 8-year relationship going down the drain. I was hurt and confused by the whole thing, so I decided not to be involved, and I painted for about 2 years. But like most singers, you need that stage. I don't know whether it's ego or megalomania or just somebody to listen to where you're coming from, but I went in the back door and I started the Blue Jays' Cabaret.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute now, what do you mean you were hurt by those years? Like, what were you hurt by? The ending of the Prunes, or the non-interest from, say, Britain and Ireland or whatever? Or what?
Not really the non-interest from Britain and Ireland. The Virgin Prunes were like very spontaneous. We really didn't know what we were doing, but we did. It's a contradiction, but that's what the Virgin Prunes were. A beautiful contradiction. Just, you know, I had high ambitions for where we could go. It was like the midlife crisis. You hit 25, everyone starts worrying about jobs, etc., relationships, and I was having none of that. and it just sort of fell on its face. So I was hurt by the fact that, you know, I felt let down by half of the band. So, and also we grew up with each other. We knew each other 15 years, you know, so it was more personal when I say hurt, rather than, I never really cared about, like, rave reviews or positive reviews from the English side. I got used to that at the age of 18 or 19, you know. So,
well, you're getting very good reviews for this current album. I mean, seriously good reviews in Britain for the current album. Yeah. So that must make you feel good.
It doesn't. I mean, yeah, it's great to get great reviews, but, you know, journalism has really gone down the drains in my books in the last few years, you know. It's headlines are the most important things, you know. I mean, the record's good, so, but that doesn't mean, you know, I take it with a pinch of salt, really. Yeah. If it's great, it's great. If it's bad, I go and do my own thing, yeah.
Well, after the Prunes 85, say, and before like getting really seriously together with just the Man Caesar, say, 87, Blue Jesus Club after that, in between, you were, as you say, dabbling in art or whatever. Now, what is the dabbling? I mean, for instance, when you got into the Virgin Prunes, musically, you didn't have a clue about music, right?
No,
I mean,
no.
Okay, well, fine. But now, did you have a clue about what you were doing art-wise? I mean, like, this, I didn't come up to Liffey in a bubble thing. Just explain that, first of all.
Well, I've always had an interest in art, even, like, when I was a kid in school. Like, the most sort of... I did an honours art in the leaving and got a B.
I think it must have been interested in art. You did honours art in the leaving,
but, Virgin Prunes was the most important thing when I left school. Like, I formed the band more or less a year or two after I left school. And it wasn't cool to go to art college then. Those were the days that art colleges was full of ponces. It still is, probably, but I always had an interest, and, like, it's my second main thing next to music. Like, if I'm on tour and have a day off, I'll go to the, you know, the Louvre, the Prado, but not being exotic here, but you know what I mean. So I think I was a little more mature when I entered into the art world than I was with Virgin Prunes, because I was only 17 when we formed it. And it was myself and Googie who actually decided to say, well, the band is gone, and we didn't know how to play guitars or write songs, but we entered into that arena, and let's do it now.
Well, would you go as far as popping down to the Bridge of Sighs, say, and taking out your easel and saying, I've an afternoon off, I think I'll paint this?
I don't think so, no. No, basically it was actually up in Danesmont we painted, which was Adam Clayton's house at the time. And basically it was like a couple of crates of beer. And out in the wilderness for a week or two on painting and getting locked.
I see, fair enough. Okay, so... what about, like, now you're different than you were? I mean, just looking at this thing here, it says, nowadays partial to a nice dark suit and a decent haircut. Friday looks less that we've come for your children art terrorist of yore, more than the elegant descendant of the Dublin literati that enchants him. Does the Dublin literati enchant you, yeah? And is it all the famous names that we all know when we just give the surnames, like, you know,
the
Wild Bee and
names, yeah. They do, actually, yeah. I mean, the first solo album, Each Man Kills the Thing He Loves, is a line from an Oscar Wilde poem. So and Oscar Wilde, even Virgin Prunes were dabbling with Oscar Wildeisms on the first If I Die, I Die LP. So, yeah, I put it down to the fact that I remember, like, when I was younger, it was this sort of, like, music and literature was like having football teams, you know. Like, in Ireland, when I was growing up, never really had there was no one really successful in the music bits, and I was a big sort of Roxy Music, Bowie fan, and then punk came along. But there was nothing in Ireland, really. Unless you wanted to rate Rory Gallagher, which was a no-go in my territory. So I used to sort of take pride in the fact that we had great writers, even way back when I was in school, you know.
Well, now, that's the thing, way back when you were in school. Are you going to tell me now that you were encouraged very much in looking into these Irish writers by the Christian Brothers? Yeah?
I don't know if it's the Christian Brothers, but Oscar Wilde and Wuthering Heights were on...
the Leaving Chorus, I suppose,
yeah. Did you do that one?
I can't remember.
And... the good English teacher.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a Christian brother. So, but I don't think the Christian Brothers would be pushing for Oscar Wilde, if you ask me. You know.
Yeah, probably not.
Lifestyle was a little too flamboyant for them. Yeah.
Well, what about your lifestyle then nowadays? I mean, with this band going out the road, are you a serious sort of rockist person now? I mean, are you going out there to be in a rock band?
In a three-piece suit.
Yeah, in a three-piece suit. I mean, like...
I might as well. I mean, a three-piece suit is more relevance than a leather jacket these days, Dave, you know.
Yeah? God, thank God I didn't bring my leather jacket down, sorry. All right, well, when you go on the road and when you go to Europe, what kind of places will you play in over there? I mean, if you're sort of better known there than, say, here in America or whatever.
It's different. Like, I'm actually starting to tour in Scandinavia. We're in about 3 or 4 dates. And I've never played Scandinavia, even within Virgin Bruin days. And I'd say they'll be sort of like ranging from your McGonagall's types up to sort of like 400 or 500 seaters. And then in Holland I'm playing very big theatres, about 3,000 seaters. Germany, about 7, 8 dates in Germany, around 1,000. Little theatre, sort of Olympia vibe in Germany. It goes from like that, and then in other places like Italy and that, where I'm not that well known, it could be back to say 400 or 500. Some more clubs, you know.
Well, by the time, say, 87, 88, when you started working with the man Caesar to really get this first solo album, if that's the right word for it, together, were you in awe or scared or inspired or whatever by suddenly coming up against real musicians? Because there's a lot of musicians around that you used on the album. I mean, Tom Waits band, people like that, Flo and Eddie.
I wasn't in awe. I was a bit, to tell the truth, but I felt Each Man Kills was a very important record for me because the themes in that, like, it dealt with sort of certain, sort of, this may sound cliched, but like the themes from love, sex and death, themes that I dabbled in Virgin Prunes, but I never felt I articulated lyrically or musically. So when myself and Morris were writing the music, we decided that when we go to record this, we'll actually use musicians that would be able to interpret the full whack, not 3 chords and an attitude, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and a lead guitar.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think I wanted to challenge myself too, you know. I had enough of improvisation on that level, because that's what the Virgin Prunes were born on, you know. So I was scared, but I was actually very challenged, and it was really exciting, and I learnt an awful lot. And when we went to work with Adam and Eve, I decided to use musicians that could play, once again, more than just the 3 chords. But I decided not to use the Mark Rebos, the Tom Waits and the Lou Reed vibe, because I wanted to sort of develop something that was more of my own, rather than jumping into other people's areas, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay, now, more of your own. What is more of your own? Is it a sort of a serious look back at who you have been for the last 10 years, or does it go to the 70, 74, those bands you knew in school, from Roxy Music right back around to T-Rex, or what?
There's elements of that. I think Adam and Eve dabbles back with this sort of, for me, the Paradise Lost almost of pop. And you have a very romantic view of what affected you when you were 14, 15, 16. We all do. And it meant everything to me when I was a kid, which is the right way. That's music is your best friend when you're growing up. So yeah, I'm going back there and dabbling in certain numbers like King of Trash and Fun and Experience. But then there's other elements that are very much still keeping the sort of a burlesque element of Gavin Friday. I think what you first said, that it's almost like the last 10, 15 years according to Gavin Friday.
Because wasn't the working title of the album The World According to Me?
It was indeed.
And you decided against that. Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
What's that? The Irish way of looking at?
Well, it's a fairy story, Dave. It's like, you know, it's the first true romance I heard of when I was a kid in school, Adam and Eve. So I'm using that more or less as a metaphor for relationships, which is dabbling in the ins and outs of relationships a bit. Also, it's the Adam and Eve within us.
The Adam and Eve within us all.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's a bit of Eve in you.
A bit of Eve in me, fair enough. Yeah. All right, I'm going to play a track, one that you just mentioned there. Who is the king of thrash, or is that facetiously ridiculous?
I am.
You're the king of thrash?
So is Mark Bolan. So is Jesus Christ, in a Catholic context. Judy Garland. There's lots of them. It's a song about fallen icons.
Okay, let's hear a song about fallen icons from Gavin Friday's album, Adam and Eve.